Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Ben Crossman, and we have a great show lined up for you today. Where today on the program, in the first part of the show, we have an interview with a company called AVCV, and let me see, I can actually look up exactly what that is. And Angeles Vista Creative Ventures. So this is going to be a very interesting take on virtual reality. We have had a number of virtual reality, game developers and other such individuals, kind of here on the program. But this is a new kind of use for VR, and I'm really, really digging it. So they created an all VR experience, kind of cinematic, movie-esque, and really, instead of your classic, shooter game or what have you, it's trying something very different. So I'm very excited to talk with our guests today. In the second part of the program, we will be doing computer and technology news, where we talk about a number of technology stories, everything ranging from the Ford F-150s. You might have heard about this. I think it's like 1.5 or 2 million Ford F-150s are under a parts recall because the seatbelts were catching on fire. Yes, the seatbelts. That, as well as the Treasury Department has charged a North Korean person with crimes against Sony and a couple other people. Hey, it's a wide-ranging topic, and definitely want to stick around for that. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and start with some of the basics, and then we'll get back into the interview, or get to the interview. So computeramerica.com, that's where you'll find everything from a link to today's guest to any articles we talk about, videos, anything we discuss will be in one place. Also, while you're there, check out the social media contest brought to you by Logitech, as well as the live video feed, which you can also find at twitch.tv/computeramerica, where we have a chat room if you feel like interacting with us. Hey, more power to you. Okay. All that being said, why don't we go ahead, get started, and as I said before, our guest, AVCV, produced I don't even know how to categorize it, I'm going to say video game for now, Where Angels Meet, and to talk all about this and how they did it and what their goal was is the founder of the company, Mr. Micah Jackson. So, Micah, welcome on to Computer America. How you doing?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Our pleasure, our pleasure. So, and I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. As you can tell, VR, I think that a lot of our audience is not a stranger to what VR is at this point. They might not, be able to use it themselves in their home, but the concept of VR between video game and movie, as you can tell, I'm kind of struggling to straddle that line. Why don't you go ahead and discuss what AVCV is, of course, first, and then what Where Angels Meet is.
Sure. All right, my pleasure. So AVCV is short or an acronym for Angeles Vista Creative Ventures, and I know that's a mouthful of a name, but essentially I started my own studio and development company in 2012. Mainly to explore just a bunch of ideas that I had. So my background is in games, in the video game industry. I've worked in the gaming industry for almost 20 years now. And one of the things that, I throughout the years, I just had many different game concepts and, ideas for even movies and all kinds of stuff. So I thought it'd be wise to at least, set up an LLC and begin to explore those and also protect them. And then ultimately, I ended up beginning to develop some of those game concepts. One being Bugchinko, which was a mobile app I released in 2015. And then I did a PC game called Messenger actually a couple of years ago. And then the current project, Where Angels Meet, is basically our first VR project, and that was done as part of the Oculus Launchpad program. So currently the focus is on this project and VR, and just personally, I'm really just fascinated and just really interested in the VR space. Like I'm a huge fan of VR, and in fact, like I was telling a friend actually over Labor Day weekend, I don't think I've played my Xbox or PlayStation in months, because like now I'm just hooked on the Oculus Rift. So that's kind of in a nutshell why AVCV was established. And Where Angels Meet is you did a great job of kind of summarizing, and it is a little bit of a departure. It actually is it's like a movie. It's basically a real-time rendered 3D animated movie that you watch in VR. So it's not interactive. You don't, it's not a game or anything. However, because of VR and the medium, you feel like you literally are a character in the experience. And so it's a very immersive experience.
And there's a lot to explore there. I think a good place, let's start broad and then work our way back down into Where Angels Meet. But before we get into the experience that you've created, in particular, talk real quickly about Oculus Launchpad program, what that is, and why you decided to go this route. Because one of the criticisms we hear about VR, which is completely justified because it's the whole chicken and egg thing. It's a new medium, so there's not a lot of content for it, but no one wants to buy it because there's not a lot of content for it. So I'm assuming that the Oculus Launchpad program is trying to fill that gap, and you decided to make something that was, like you said, not really interactive, but it's very, I guess, interactive because you sit there and you feel like you're part of it. If you don't, even if you don't directly influence it. Talk about this program, what it's destined, or what it's trying to do, and why you felt that kind of a movie kind of experience was a good way to add content to VR.
Sure, yeah, and actually you bring up a great point. I think so. The Launchpad program is a program Oculus started in, I think it was 2016 was their first year. So yeah, I was in the sort of the second year in 2017. And essentially what it is to your point, basically I think what Oculus is trying to do is, like you said, get content for a very wide audience. Obviously there's games, and VR is great for gaming. So you have, your kind of typical genres, related to that, and then even with that, you have similar genres of, immersive experiences is what they call them, where it's not necessarily interactive, but similar to Where Angels Meet, you are going through an environment. And a lot of those are, space, sci-fi, kind of horror genre. Mm-hmm. And so I think what they realized is they wanted to have something that appeals to, the masses. And the Launchpad program is sort of an incubator that they started to essentially partner with and try to find smaller studios and independent creators to create, content for the Rift and, now the Go, their mobile device. And yeah, it was a great experience. Essentially, what's funny is I actually applied for the program because I was signing up to be an Oculus developer.
Right.
And I just happened to see, they had a post about the Launchpad, and it was the last day to apply. So I kind of dropped everything and just applied. And and 3 months later, I was accepted into the program. And essentially what they do is they have you come up to Facebook headquarters. Facebook owns Oculus, and they have like a 2-day boot camp. And they essentially, have various speakers and people who are, kind of key people within the Oculus organization, kind of give some insight in terms of, where they see VR going and how they would like to, hopefully get more content creators to create interesting stuff, for their platforms. And then outside of that, it actually is like a competition. So basically, where angels meet, I had to submit a proposal and a demo within the sort of a 2 or 3 month period. And based on that demo, they would choose to actually fund a select number of those projects. And fortunately, mine was one of those that they chose to add some funding to. So that's how it got made, ultimately.
Yeah, no, and very, very cool story. And I didn't know that Facebook could do that because, being such a different kind of technology, people have been developing video games for decades, and people have been making movies for even longer. It's a very those are very exact sciences. I think they have it down to a formula. But then when it comes to VR, there's a lot of there's a lot of ways that you could take it, and we're going to talk about some of your creative decisions when you did this. But I did find it interesting that they had people that could, I guess, kind of claim to come out and say here's the best way to do X, Y, Z. When I think that level of experimentation that we're still experiencing, we still don't really know the best of X, Y, and Z. So let me go ahead and kind of get into where angels meet and talk about just VR as a medium and as a creative medium. You said that you've made video games before. Everything from mobile games to, I assume, full-fledged desktop games and things like that. How was it kind of developing in VR as opposed to what you're used to? Did you ever forget that, oh, wait, people actually care about what's behind them all of a sudden or something like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it was interesting is it wasn't too different, and mainly because so I use Unity, which is a software that is pretty widely used software to develop video games. And so I was very familiar with that software working on the other projects. And interestingly enough, it actually is one of the main engines used to also create VR stuff. And so that transition was pretty easy. However, it is interesting, once like you were saying, no one really has a VR playbook, right now.
Right.
Like everything is experimental, essentially. And we're starting to see some standards sort of, begin to form, but it is very early, and which is what excites me just as a content creator. But yeah, I think one of the interesting things is you realize that you cannot control where people look. I think that's the biggest hurdle with VR, because it is immersive, and because, the viewer can look, 360 degrees, they can look anywhere. It's one of the challenges is trying to direct, the viewer in terms of where to look, and it's also a challenge, I think, for traditional filmmakers that are now sort of experimenting with VR because they're so used to having a cinematographer or so used to controlling where the camera is looking, and it's one of those things too. If you're driving a narrative or a story, you have to employ some tricks basically in order to keep the viewer engaged and also have them understand, like, oh, you should look in this direction because a character will be here,
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an interesting challenge, but again, I think it makes it exciting.
Right. So, and we should also kind of mention how, obviously, to use, or I say use, how to actually play or watch Where Angels Meet. This is available through, many of them are available through, I believe, Steam, Oculus. A lot of games do use Steam. How are you kind of distributing your game? I'm just going to call it game. How are you distributing your game?
All right. Yeah, no problem. It'll be, because it's part of the Launchpad program, it'll be an Oculus Rift exclusive.
Oh.
So it will be released later this month for the Oculus Rift headset in the Oculus Store. So if you happen to have a Rift, it's sort of like the App Store, essentially, for the Rift.
I got you. So as long as you have the hardware and you can pretty easily find it, download it. Let's get into the story where angels meet. The name, obviously very provocative. You could take it a couple ways, and I guess give us a quick synopsis of just what it is that you kind of experienced throughout this playthrough.
Sure. So it's the name Where Angels Meet, and this is probably the best way to explain it. So you follow the life of a young African American boy named Marcus, and essentially when Marcus has he encounters challenges in life, his grandmother gives him a piece of advice, and she tells him, when things get tough, you imagine a place where angels meet. And so it becomes this sort of this place of refuge in his imagination that allows him to kind of cope with some of the challenges. And so in terms of the VR viewer, you're taken to this place that I've created in VR called the Garden of Light. And it's sort of like it's a really pretty environment. It's one that I just enjoy hanging out in. But that's kind of, it also serves as kind of a hub for the story. And the viewer is actually Marcus's guardian angel, thus the angel in the title. So two things that are kind of a key there is that because you are an angel, it gives you a sense of agency, so you understand why you are, in the environment. But it also explains why you are not interacting with the environment, or you're not, characters are not talking to you directly. So it's also a great vehicle to kind of what I was touching on earlier about allowing the narrative to take place and allowing the story to take place. It gives the viewer an understanding of, oh, okay, I understand why we are going through this heavenly garden place, and then the next moment we're in, an office building. And so it's not jarring, because you get like, oh, all right, I'm an angel. I can kind of travel, through time and space and such.
So obviously immediately there, you mentioned the main character is an African American youth, and you go about, and I'm assuming that there are issues related to, and feel free to to correct this at any point, but I'm assuming that there are going to be issues that are going to be very societal, to obviously the African American community, but also just people in general, and it's going to be you experiencing those through his eyes, and or at least over his shoulder, and then you going through trying to see him how he copes with these actions, because I'm assuming if there's no conflict whatsoever, very, very beautiful vistas, but a good story needs a good conflict. So where does the conflict come in for this story?
Yeah, so it's basically, the initial idea I had for this project, so one thing is, like, VR is a great tool, I think, to, as I mentioned, immerse you in something. And so with that, I felt like it would be amazing to have viewers experience, whether it be racial bias or just societal things, or even just challenges in life that we can all identify with. And so in Marcus's upbringing in this piece, what you see are key moments in his life, and some of them involve racism. But it's not racism that's overt. It's the type of social bias or racism that I've experienced in my own life, where it's, in some cases, it may be very subtle, right? And it may be things that other people don't even realize that they're doing. And, for example, there's a scene where Marcus, he's an adult, and he is going to a job interview. And he gets on an elevator, and as he gets on the elevator, there's a woman, and she sort of grabs her purse and moves back, and he doesn't necessarily pay attention, but because of your position, because you're able to see what's going on, it's one of those things that hopefully people are able to catch and maybe discuss, right? And say, hey, did you notice, this lady kind of moved back, and then there's another guy in the elevator who sort of stares him down. He kind of looks, and when Marcus kind of looks his direction, he looks the other way.
Right.
And those are the types of things that, that's just one example. There are others throughout the piece, but those are the types of things that, I wanted to sort of call attention to and hopefully spark some discussion around that, I think it happens, like I said, it happens to me very often, and I think it happens daily. And it's the type of thing that, I don't think we really talk about in society. I think
and just to jump in here, it's one of those things that you can you can bang the table, you can say you can preach it all day long, walk a mile in their shoes. But up until this point, you've had to rely on an overwhelming sense of empathy. You've had to rely on, just kind of imagination. Just, imagine if you were that person for a day. How would you react? How would you do this? How would you do that? VR has been hailed, like you said, as a very good medium for creating experiences, and especially experiences. You mentioned some of your competition in the startup program involved, floating aimlessly through space, which is cool. Many of us will never get to experience that. But to change the color of our skin, but to kind of change how other people actually perceive us, because anyone out there watching the video portion knows I will never be mistaken for an African American. It's just never going to happen. Creating experiences like this where I can put on the headset, I can see these interactions without myself, without me interjecting myself into anything. Does it? And this is, I guess I'm kind of asking for feedback from audience members, but does it kind of help? If people come out and said, does that really happen? Or if they asked you, he's like, how'd you come up with that? And you just said, hey, that's my life.
Yeah. It's been, the response has been incredible. I think on a number of levels. I think one, in terms of, as you said, like the empathy angle. I think VR is an amazing tool to allow people to experience true empathy, right? You're able to really see, because you feel like you're in the environment, you're able to really kind of get a sense of, wow, like this is, I never really would pay attention to this, but now that I'm in it, I kind of feel, what's happening here. But I think too, the other response has just been, I think it's touched people in an emotional way, because it deals also with death and the afterlife. And I was fortunate to, we demoed an early version at VRLA, which is a big VR expo here in Los Angeles. And the response was incredible. I mean, there were plenty of people that had tears in their eyes, when I took the headset off, and just we're literally speechless. I was asking, well, what did you think? And was there anything you didn't like? And they were just like, I don't even know what to say. Like,
That's a good response.
So, yeah. And, it's one of those things where, yes, movies can do that. You can get, that kind of emotional response, but I have never really experienced anything like this, this type of response. So I'm very, passionate about VR, and I think it's one of those, it's still early, but I think as more people experience things like this, and more people create content like this, that they'll really see the strength and the power, of the medium. I think it's one of those things where it can be used to teach, to educate, to entertain, to train, and there's just so many uses for it. So This is just one of many.
Right, and I have it's one of those situations where there's a video game. It's pretty popular on VR. I'm not sure if it still is. It was a little while ago. It was called VR Chat, and they kind of put people into chat room lobby kind of deals, and people could create their own avatars. And it was very interesting to see people. Obviously, not a lot of people put a real accurate representation of themselves, but when someone came up as a as a weird mud puddle monster thing, everyone kind of interacted with him as long as he kept character as a mud puddle monster thing. And it was interesting to see people are very they're very willing to accept the premise that you put forward in front of them in VR. In a lot of video games, I guess they could see. In a lot of video games, I guess you see that aren't VR. You see the TV screen. You see a picture. You know that you're interacting with it. It's not very immersive. But VR is very, very different. People get very caught up in whatever you try to say as a creator is real. So I think that you've definitely chosen a good medium for your story. Talk about as well, knowing this, talk about social good in general. Racism is, of course, still a problem, and it's a very, very big task to, try to get a handle on. So kudos for, trying to, for your first attempt to tackle that. But there's other social good. There's poverty issues. There's, environmental issues that you can't see readily. There's a lot of different issues that lend themselves to, I think, a good storytelling, good immersive storytelling. Do you see social good adapting VR for its own purposes?
Yes, definitely. And in fact, some of the fellow creators in my Launchpad program year, in fact, a friend of mine, he is doing a VR experience that explores the homelessness in downtown Los Angeles, like in Skid Row, basically.
Yeah.
And it's such a powerful, as you said, it's one thing to watch it on a screen. It's another to put a headset on and literally be next to this person that's telling their story of how they got to where they are, And, I think there's another VR experience called Notes on Blindness that there's a man who talks about how he's actually becoming blind, and it's a very interesting experience because you sort of see shadows at first, and then you realize that you're beginning to lose your vision. And so it's such a powerful, way of illustrating, whether it be the handicaps or the challenges of other people. Like I said, it's an incredible tool for empathy. It's one thing to watch a movie, but another to really, experience what another person might be going through. And there's another fellow creator. She's doing a 360 film documentary on a man who I believe is paralyzed from the neck down. And so you understand, and basically in her piece, he goes to a museum for the first time, and she sort of does this through bringing a 360 camera, through the museum, so he's able to experience what it's like to, walk through a gallery. So there's just so many, ways of using VR to truly give perspective, to an audience that just hasn't been able, you just haven't been able to do before.
No, and it certainly sounds like a lot of people have found a lot of ways to tell stories that you mentioned a couple there I would have never thought to experience. So that's definitely a great thing as well. So hey, we're about to head off into break, Micah. Would you mind actually staying over for a couple minutes so we can continue the conversation?
Sure.
All right, perfect. So everyone, we're talking to Mr. Micah Jackson, and he is the founder of a company called AVCV. And if you want to go check it out, Where Angels Meet, we have a link to it in the show notes over at Computer America. More after the break, everyone. Music Means we'll be right back after these commercials, and more Computer America right after this. Everyone, stay tuned.
Greece is cheap.
But the airfare costs a fortune.
Paris?
Not much closer, and again, airfare...
What about Puerto Vallarta?
Let's face it, flying anywhere is just too expensive.
Wait, what's this? Low-cost airlines.
With one call to low-cost airlines, you'll drastically slash your travel costs. We're talking insanely low airline prices to any of your favorite destinations. Where would you like to go? London, Rome, Costa Rica, Australia?
Wow, that's cheap.
So why wait? Call now to learn how crazy cheap it is to fly anywhere in the U.S. or international. Our prices are so low, we can't publish them. The only way to get them is to call to instantly hear the most amazing best deals on airline travel. It's that easy. So call now and start packing.
800-215-4461. 800-215-4461. 800-215-4461. That's 800-215-4461.
We are all Brother Wolf. 10 years ago, a group of locals banded together to create positive change. We took animals into our homes, held adoption events at local retailers, and talked to the community about our mission to help build a no-kill Asheville. A decade later, we have achieved so many victories for animals in need. There's been so much progress, yet there's still so much to do. As part of our year-long celebration, we encourage you to become a member of our special Compassionate Circle program. With a monthly donation of $10 or more, you will have behind-the-scenes access to the work we are doing at Brother Wolf. Our goal is to reach 1,000 members because we receive no government funding. Working together, we can help build and sustain no-kill communities. Learn more at compassionatecircle.bwar.org. We are a 501c3 tax-deductible organization.
And welcome back to the Computer America Show. It is 32 minutes past the hour as we continue on here. And for anyone just joining us, if you missed any part of today's conversation, feel free to check out the Computer America podcast, which is simply today's show, rebroadcast wherever podcasts are heard. So links to all that over at computeramerica.com. And we continue on with our guest, Mr. Micah Jackson, and he is the founder of AVCV as we talk about Where Angels Meet. And Micah, thank you for continuing on with us. And one thing I was going to kind of ask you in the break was obviously you said that you submitted this to a couple film festivals. I'm not sure if film festivals have their own category for this kind of thing, but kind of versus a traditional medium, a lot of award panels or judges or a lot of people who are used to movies being sit in a chair, watch a screen, you're good to go. Do you think that what you're doing is comparable to a movie, or do you think that this is its own category and it should be judged, such as that, and separate from, something that maybe is played in a cinema?
Ooh, that's a good question. So actually there are a few film festivals that have VR specific categories. So, for example, Sundance and Tribeca, a lot of the larger, or the more notable film festivals have begun just individual programs for VR in particular. And so some of the other ones, though, I think are still trying to figure out. In fact, I was considering applying to one, and I emailed and asked, are you guys able to accept or display VR content, and they were like, no, we're not, we don't really have the setup for that. So I think it's going to probably take a few years because VR is still, it's still relatively new, and I would consider Where Angels Meet to actually be essentially like a short film. The total runtime is about 30 minutes, which for VR, which is another interesting thing for VR, where, most linear kind of narrative experiences are fairly short right now. They're about, maybe 10, 15 minutes is kind of the the average. And so you're not really seeing a lot of much, movie like 1 hour, hour and a half, pieces
Well,
in
that
VR
would,
right now.
and I've played VR, video games, and I'm, for someone who can sit here and let's see, the latest was the WoW release, and I think I played for about 30 hours straight. Trust me, I can play my video games. When it comes to VR, it's a pretty intense experience, and I could probably only last, maybe 3 hours would be starting to push it. I start getting, a bit tired. Asking people for 2 hours of VR time, that's pretty strenuous for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's one of those things where, again, over time, maybe people will build up more of a, I won't say tolerance, but, it'll be more natural for them to spend an hour. Like, I can spend 2 hours in the headset, playing games as well, but not everyone can, so it's one of those things to consider. If you're...
And so half an hour, I can completely see that, that's very good. I mean, talk about another thing that's, you're also, kind of competing in the same space as replayability. Is this kind of, you watch it, you're good to go, or is this something that, you could watch it a couple of times and pick up on different things that you didn't catch before?
Yeah, it's a great point. Actually, the latter. So over Labor Day weekend, I had a bunch of friends come over, and anyone who comes to my house, I try to get them to go through Where Angels Meet just to get the response. And it was interesting. Pretty much all of them said they wanted to do it again because it is so immersive, and there's a lot of detail that I've included in each of the scenes and each of the worlds. One friend literally said, I felt like I was missing stuff. Like I just couldn't see everything, and that's why they wanted to go through again. So I think the replayability is definitely there. I think it's an experience that, if you go through it one time, you will more than likely want to go through it again because you want to see other areas or try to, catch something that you might have missed, in the first run through.
Yeah, and of course, I can totally see that being the case because if something catches your attention to the right, that means there's 270 degrees, or actually, I think viewing degrees is like 130 something. So there's there's another 200 some odd degrees that you're not currently watching. It's and hey, that could be very, very fun. Talk about Where Angels Meet. You mentioned it was picked up for to be in the 2017 the Oculus Launchpad program. Is it available now? Is it going to be released? Talk about when people can experience what you've created.
Sure. So the goal is to release it before the end of this month. We're doing a few little tech tweaks at the moment. But it should be available in the Oculus Store hopefully by the end of this month. And one of the things, too, that I'm also currently in talks with a company that they are doing VR theaters like around the country. So I'm in talks with them as well to hopefully have it shown in their sort of VR theaters as well, so that even if you don't have a Rift or, the hardware at home, you can go somewhere and experience it. Right.
And that's a very good point. For a lot of VR, that's prices have certainly come down over the past couple of years. It used to be like a $2,000 proposition, $800 for the headset, another $1,200 for the computer. Now you can get a full-blown VR experience for, I think someone has one that's like all-inclusive for like $200 or $300. It's price has definitely come down. I don't believe that's it might be a version of the Oculus, but either way, VR is certainly kind of working its way down the ability for people to get hardware is, I think, now on par with consoles. You mentioned consoles at the beginning. I would say that's a pretty good comparison to where they are now. They aren't at the level of, let's say, a handheld console, but a console nonetheless. I think it's there. If you have some time, Micah, could you talk about kind of the future of VR? Obviously, you're developing in this space. You now have something that to show for it, and I guess after getting your hands dirty, where do you see VR? Is VR all hype? Every time I mention hype, everyone mentions 3D television, or is VR an actual medium that can survive?
So yeah, VR is not. VR is not going anywhere. I would say at the very least, the business applications will keep VR, and in fact, I think that's what's keeping it afloat right now. So VR is being used for all kinds of stuff, like training in aerospace to develop, spacecraft and aircraft, and for training and education. So it will always have a practical use for day-to-day use within a business. I think on the entertainment side, I think it's going to take some time. I feel that the real on-ramp is going to be the VR centers or the VR arcades that are already starting to, pop up. Basically, one of the bigger ones is called The Void, which I think Disney owns part of it, and they have like the Star Wars experience. And I think as those types of things begin to open up around the country and give people their first, VR experience, I think people will get it and say, oh, now I see, why this is cool, or why, now I'm interested in buying the $300, headset or what have you. And I think it's just going to be a kind of a slow process at first. But I think once more people experience VR, then the growth will sort of hockey stick, if you will. I think it'll just sort of really rise very quickly.
Yeah, and my first experience was actually at CES one year. When it was with I believe the Vive was the first one that I tried, and you're right. It's something that I think a lot of people look at it and go, I have computer games, I have a television, why do I need VR? Nothing there looks really exciting. But after I put the headset on and I tried it for half an hour until they beat me out with a stick, I really understood that it's something different. It's different, and you can't just tell people that. You can't just tell people, trust me, it's different. Go ahead and spend $1,000. It's something that they definitely have to go try. So I'm very happy whenever I see we had a couple of companies on that built VR experiences in places like large malls across the country. They have these big VR experiences where I assume escape rooms are leaving, and also places such as Best Buy. You can try on a headset that 1,000 other people have tried on. But just trying it for 10-15 minutes, I think you'll really start to understand that it's not just another video game. It's not just another platform. It's a different kind of platform.
Yeah, totally. It's definitely the trial is going to be being able to get people to try on the headset and see an experience is what sells it. And it's unfortunately it's one of those tough things because they're not just available everywhere. So.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask this question, but I will answer it myself. What I really saw that kind of made me think that VR is destined for the mainstream. And I guess a lot of people, this aspect of it really hasn't come up, and it's kind of like what you've done with Where Angels Meet. But I believe it was journalists from Nat Geo. They were reporting on a war zone somewhere in the Middle East, and to hear that. So many of the residents there have died, and there's active gunfights, and a couple buildings got blown up. Like, to hear all that on a radio broadcast, to read it in print, to see pictures on a website, that's one thing. But for them to take a 360 camera with 360 audio and to put yourself next to a building that literally explodes, and you can slap on and you can slap on VR, and suddenly it's not just words, it's an actual it's someone's home that blows up in front of your eyes. That really struck me as something that VR can do. It really takes words and puts meaning behind them.
Definitely.
So, and again, that was my answer to the question. But my question for you: What do you think is really going to, make VR go mainstream? Is it movies such as the one you created? Is it video games? What's going to make people, really want to have at least one in their home?
Honestly, I think what it's going to take is one is just economics, right? I think the cost of the headsets are going to need to come to a price point where people are willing to just pay and try it, right? But I think too, what VR needs are a few of those sort of killer apps, if you will, like those things where people just by word of mouth are like, oh my goodness, I experienced this thing. You should go check it out, and they're like, well, how do I do it? And thus they go off and buy. I think back to like when the Nintendo Wii came out, I don't know how, 10 years ago or whatever.
Yeah.
But, I just remember, I was one of the first people to have a Wii, and I was like, oh, you got to try this. The tennis is crazy, and it was one of those things where you just heard at parties, parents telling other parents, like, yeah, we bought it for our kids, but we actually really enjoy it. I think it's going to take something like that where people are, whoever owns the headset are really excited about something, and then they're sharing it with their friends, and thus, by word of mouth.
It really worked out for for AR with Pokemon Go, where I saw people who were not Pokemon fans, people who were not big cell phone users. As soon as there was something that you can collect, and it was pretty simple and intuitive, everyone went crazy for it. So maybe VR needs its own Pokemon Go.
Yeah.
So
perhaps.
Yeah, and that'll be very, very interesting. So let's see. I think we can kind of skip where VR is going to be in 5 years, because I think between you and me, we hope VR is everywhere in 5 years. Micah, I think I've taken up more than I should of your time, but I want to say thank you. And yeah, and of course, very interesting conversation. I'll go ahead and let you have the last word. If people want to find out more about AVCV or where angels meet, where's the best place they can go?
Definitely check out the website, whereangelsmeet.com. No dashes or anything, just all one word. And and I would appreciate it too. You can also just find me on Instagram at AVCV Games, and hopefully too, if you have a Rift, check it out. It'll be out hopefully by the end of this month.
Very, very cool. And of course, we'll have links to all of that in the show notes over at computeramerica.com. Micah, really, this was a very enjoyable conversation. Thank you for joining us here on Computer America.
Thank you. I enjoyed it as well.
All right, and have a great day, and looking forward to see your next project.
All right. Thanks a lot, Ben.
Have a great one. Bye-bye. And everyone, there he goes. And everyone, Micah Jackson, founder of AVCV. And again, if you want to find out more, check out the show notes. So that was a very good interview. I definitely enjoyed that. But we have a little bit more time in the program here today, so we can get to some computer and technology news. And this is a segment dedicated entirely to the latest, greatest in computer technology. And I think we have one about science that I really would like to get to. Here we go, computer and technology news. Let's go ahead and get started with today's computer technology news, and we have a number of stories, a lot that we should get to. Let's go ahead and start off with this one. I like it when people get the recognition that they deserve. So that's why we have this story here from Ars Technica. And I heard about this one last night, actually driving home. I really, really like that, things can actually get corrected in the history books. Check this out. Jocelyn Bell Burnell wins a $3 million prize for discovering pulsars. And you may think, pulsars? But wait, Ben, those have been known for, 40 years, or, give or take. Let's see, 1974, the Nobel Prizes were handed out in physics for the researchers who first identified, theorized, and, talked about pulsars. Well, turns out one of the people who really, really worked on pulsars and did a lot of the data crunching, a lot of the number crunching, and that person was Miss Jocelyn Bell, where she worked at Cambridge. She worked with the other gentleman who did receive the Nobel Prize in that year for discovering pulsars. And let's see, there's a quote here saying that I reckon that they made a mistake admitting me, and they'd find their mistake and throw me out in due course. But I had quite a fight to get there, and I wasn't going to walk away from it. That, of course, being her remarks about her research in physics. It drove her to work harder than anyone else, and it was a painstaking persistence that led her to a momentous discovery, which, of course, as we know through radio telescopes, was the pulsar. All that happened, and again, she was not recognized for her contributions to this whole thing. But I'm going to keep this one short because not a lot of time. But Jocelyn Bell Burnell, retroactively, I want to say that. Let's see. I don't think she won the Nobel Peace Prize, but she won a grant. She was just awarded a $3 million special breakthrough prize in fundamental physics. And of course, the discovery of pulsars was a huge find in its time and even today. So she was awarded $3 million. And hey, check it out. She says that she will use her prize money, instead of just keeping it for herself. And, she's now 75 years old. So I'm sure $3 million could go a long way. She's actually going to donate it to programs that help foster ethnic minority and women in science, so that maybe, just maybe, they'd be able to contribute to researchers around the world for years to come. So, hey, happy story all around, and again, congratulations to her. Again, I don't think that she was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. So even though the omission infuriated a lot of the professionals working in the field, no Nobel Peace Prize, but she did get the grant and she is donating it. And hey, her name is getting added to the history books. Very, very cool. Definitely like to see it. Check that one out. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about a couple here that we should just mention quickly as well. Seatbelts. You know them. They're the bits of cloth, a little bit of metal. There's a plastic receiver on the other side of the seats. You wear them so that you don't die in cars. They're pretty good technology, except when they're not. If you have a Ford F-150 sold within the last, I want to say 3 or 4 years, you will, of course, have to get the exact numbers and, I believe certain Ford F-150 models produced since 2014. So if you have a Ford F-150 purchased between 2014 and 2018, definitely go get this checked out. You don't want to get caught up in this. But it's a seatbelt tensioner, and this is that little electronic device that, in the event of a sudden deceleration, i.e. a crash, it will actually tighten the seatbelt so that there's not that give and you don't go flying through your windshield. Well, that little piece of gadget, through some bad wiring, I think, or the part's bad, something about that thing, it's causing fires. And they've already reported 3 trucks that were completely destroyed due to faulty seatbelt tensioners or pre-tensioners, because it happens, obviously before. Get that checked out. If you have one of these, do not get your car. They said that some front seatbelt pretensioners can generate excessive sparks when they deploy. And the pretensioner on the Ford F-150 inside of the B-pillar, the vertical part of the body, they said that when it activates, it exhausts gases inside the B-pillar, and sparks can ignite these gases. There you have it. If you have a Ford F-150, again, be careful. Do not set your truck on fire because of your seatbelt. I thought that was an interesting story because you never really think of your seatbelt as being electronic in any way. And I saw that, it was causing cars to burn up. Okay, there's that one. One that's actually a chatter mentioned. We had it lined up in the queue, so we're going to mention it here as well. British Airlines probably won't affect many people here in the United States. I don't think British Airways is a huge, is a huge runner of planes, at least here in America, strictly to, Great Britain and the United States maybe. But if you, for any reason, have found yourself doing business with British Airways, you might want to keep an eye on your credit statements, saying that they had a website hack that exposed customer financial data. And they said that customers who book flights on the British Airways website or apps between, August 21st at about, an hour till midnight until about the same time on September 5th. So about 2 solid weeks. They had their personal financial data compromised due to a cybersecurity breach, where the company post announcing the event unwaveringly stated that anyone who made booking in the time frame had their information stolen, which I think this is a great practice. Compare this to a lot of other companies out there who have been compromised, especially financially. Their customers' financial records have been compromised, and we don't hear about it for weeks or months, or in some cases, years. The fact that they are able to tell us this really the next day, I think is a very, very big step forward. So they said that no passport or travel details were stolen, but the post recommended that those who were affected call their banks, reset their passwords, get new cards, scrub their carpets, clean their cats, just anything you can do. Make sure everything is nice and ship tight for cyber security. And so there's that one. We have time for just one more, and obviously we're flying through these things, not really getting into too much detail in any of these. We apologize. If you want to dig into these further, go ahead and check it out at computeramerica.com, where we have links to all of them. The last one we're going to quickly cover, you may recall we covered it back in 2014. Sony Pictures was hacked. Some of their latest movies were stolen from a third party. Essentially, they were Sony was sending their finished movies, quote unquote finished, to special effects, After Effects, touch-ups, whatever, to places in India. And someone within the company sold or stole the movies, which, when you talk about these movies, you're talking about thousands of jobs, millions of dollars of investment. They're no laughing matter. And also on top of that, a bank heist. Well, in both of those instances, they have linked it to a North Korean resident. And that is coming from the U.S. Treasury Department, saying that they actually have a gentleman here, Park Jin Hoik. That is the person that they are charging from North Korea, working on behalf of the North Korean government, and he is a computer programmer. So, that being said, they have accused him of the Sony Pictures hack in 2014, the 2016 Bangladesh bank heist, and more, saying that we will not allow North Korea to undermine global cybersecurity, to advance its interests and generate illicit revenues in violation of our sanctions. It had been long rumored that North Korea was the one behind these hacks, though actually getting that proven, we've been a little wishy-washy on that. Finally, we have someone charged and someone to really point a finger at and say North Korea is doing cyber warfare. There's your proof. Everyone, the music in the background means that we are just about done. Thank you so much for tuning into Computer America. I want to thank everyone for your support, everyone for listening, no matter how you do it. That's the best way. Thank you so much. Everyone, until next time, be sure to tune in Monday through Friday, 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern. And hey, we'll catch you next time. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone. And bye, chatters. Bye, podcasters. And yeah, looking forward to it.